Hey everyone, this is Eddie Kalegi with Tim Moore reminding you that SportsSpeak is now powered by SeatGeek. SeatGeek is the one-stop shop for tickets to sporting events, concerts, and so much more.
Use the promo code SportsSpeak at checkout for $20 off your first purchase.
SeatGeek, let there be live. Now, on to the show. How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of SportsSpeak Live, powered by SeatGeek. Promo code SportsSpeak, all caps, one word, $20 off your first purchase at checkout. Going to be time soon for you to start buying those baseball tickets, and that's why we're doing this episode today. Major League Baseball 2024 season preview. There have been 2 games already between the Dodgers and the Padres, but it's just 2 games at a 162. Might as well preview for the real opening day, which is this coming Thursday. We got Tim Moore back in the house with us. Raheel Jaswal did a good job filling in the last couple of weeks. We did our March Madness episode, talked some NFL free agency. Tim, before we get to baseball, though, I want to let you say what you have to say about Saquon Barkley. Raheel was pretty passionate about the move. Since you haven't been here, you've been tweeting about it. I've been waiting to hear what you've had to say about this situation on this show, and that's going to come right now.
Yeah, well, I'll say it like this. Saquon talked all this about legacy, how much New York's meant to him, right? His father was a Jets fan. Of course, Saquon, not exactly a Jets fan. But despite growing up in Pennsylvania, which, again, I understand exactly why he went to Philly, it's the idea that he embraced the mentality of a New Yorker and talked all last season about, yeah, we didn't get the deal done, but I want to have a legacy here with the Giants. And the fact of the matter is, the Giants offered him practically the same contract that Philadelphia gave him. And to me, when it's all said and done with Saquon Barkley, for somebody that talks about legacy, for somebody that says that I want to be a Giant for life, to immediately turn around and go on a tirade on Twitter with Giants legends like Tiki Barber, and to start stuff especially, really, to me, just shows he didn't care about the New York Giants. He's tired of losing, which, again, I understand winning plays a big factor in legacy. But to me, overall, for somebody that claims they are loyal and for somebody that claims they care, I'll give you an example. Aaron Judge, and I mentioned it so deeply. Aaron Judge is the pure definition of what it means to be about legacy. He could have left the Yankees. He could have left the San Francisco, who was giving him a far better deal. But him embracing what the New York Yankees is in the city of New York and emphasizing that he wanted to finish the story here and it didn't matter what it'd take, to me, emphasizes the leadership of why Aaron Judge, for example, is the captain in the face of New York of the New York Yankees. Saquon Barkley isn't the popularity of Aaron Judge. Saquon Barkley isn't even the level of athlete in terms of health, of a lot of top New York athletes, to be quite frank with you. So really, it pisses me off that Saquon Barkley relatively lied to Giants fans. And overall, I'll finish it with this, Eddie, because if you got to me a week ago, I think I'd be a lot more fired up about it. But I think, truthfully, again, not going back to Tiki Barber, but I really think what he said really makes sense and it makes truth. And I know Saquon got offended by it, but you're dead to us. That's the best way of putting it. You're dead to us, Giants fans. You betrayed our trust. You went to the one place nobody wants you to go, other than maybe Dallas, right? So, to me, Saquon, enjoy Philadelphia. We'll look forward to booing you twice a year. And again, I'm wishing the best for Saquon Barkley, but for the Giants, to be truthfully honest, the injury history is way too much. The investment would be way too much. I'm not saying Devin Singletary is exactly a game-breaking back by any means, but I have a lot of confidence and trust with the Singletary and Dable system. So, hasta la vista. Have a fun time, Saquon. But I feel betrayed. It really ticks me off because for somebody that's so much about legacy, to betray a fan base that was behind you from start to finish and has had nothing but made excuses for you, especially, it shows how much you cared about us, the fans, which was nothing. So enjoy Philadelphia, and at least you're still on the East Coast where you can be home. But hopefully, you enjoy choking in the playoffs. So we'll go with that.
Yeah, well, we'll see. At least the Eagles have a better chance of making the playoffs. But I mean, my whole thing with Saquon too is, and I'll if you want to see the whole discussion me and Raheel had that was like 20 minutes long, that's on last week's episode. But to keep it simple and short, I'm excited about the move in some ways for an Eagles fan, but I echo the same concerns as you. He's not healthy. He's had 2 healthy years in his whole career. I've thought, and it doesn't change my opinion just because he's now an Eagle. I think he's been one of the most overrated players in the league his entire career. I really think so. I do not think he's that good of a running back. He's a good back, but he's not a star to me. To me, he never really has been.
He's a
He shined in what was a really bad Giants offense.
say he's very good at receiving, which I'll give him that. He has very solid hands, except for at the start of the season where two of Daniel Jones's interceptions came directly out of Saquon's hands. But to me, Eddie, really what has made Saquon Barkley a successful running back, it's not the fact that he's consistently around that 1,000-yard mark when healthy, right? It's when he gets the opportunity to finally make that big play, it'll come. And that's the problem, really. You look at him throughout the season, especially with the Giants. And Giants had an awful offensive line. But, Saquon would have a bunch of runs like 2-3 yards, and then he'd break out this big 20-30 yard run. That's what the hype is about Saquon Barkley, is that when he gets the opportunity, he can be a game breaker and take control. And that's the reason why that Minnesota playoff game, for example, between him and Daniel Jones, and why, and that's a totally different conversation when we get to that later, but why I still have faith in Daniel Jones if the Giants do go that direction. But to me, overall, health is a big thing. And I do want to say one compliment as well to the Eagles, and I know you don't hear this too often from me, Eddie, but Roseman to make these big moves this offseason. Boy, oh boy, the Eagles, I mean, to lose almost everything pretty much after this last year, you can't say that they're not trying. And that's a big thing moving forward because that defense just got a lot of help. The team is definitely in a positive direction going into next season.
Yeah, I do agree with you on that. I think the positive direction is certainly there. But let's go to Major League Baseball. And so I saw a tweet, and I think it's very funny to put what happened over the last couple of days into perspective with this. The whole Shohei Ohtani and Ippei scandal, it feels like a very Mets type of thing. And it's weird to see it happen for a team. Shohei Ohtani almost ended up on the Mets, but he didn't. This seems like the type of thing that would have happened if Shohei Ohtani had signed with the Mets. He plays one game, and then there's a major multi-million-dollar gambling scandal. This whole situation is still very, very weird to me with Shohei Ohtani and his interpreter. Basically, the whole deal is that the report is that the interpreter was fired because he was gambling with an illegal bookie on other sports, not baseball. But in order to pay off the illegal bookie, $4.5 million were used from Shohei Ohtani's bank account. Now, let me just say this. I hate to speculate on something, but we have seen many athletes who have made a lot of money in the past have gambling problems that are well documented. Two prime examples are Michael Jordan and Phil Mickelson. I don't know if Shohei Ohtani is necessarily the culprit here and that Ippei's taking the fall, but I think it's a decent theory to consider. At the same time, Ohtani could be completely uninvolved and Ippei could have just used him and taken $4.5 million from him. But this is just a crazy situation. And to happen right at the beginning of the year, literally the story comes out after Shohei Ohtani's first game playing for the Los Angeles Dodgers. And it really makes me wonder if whether Ohtani or Ippei was the compulsive gambler here, whether the Angels knew about that. And maybe that's part of the reason they didn't make the big push to keep him. Maybe they had some forethought that this was not really going to be, this was something that was going to come up as a problem in the future. So I don't really know where to take this story because there's just not enough clarity. And the story has changed from both Shohei and from Ippei from the first day to the second day of the report. So I don't know where to go with this. I don't think it's really going to affect Shohei Ohtani's play on the field, but it's definitely going to be a storyline to follow all season long.
I think it's going to be a big distraction, to be honest with you, with Major League Baseball, not just Shohei. And here's the big thing, you know, until the full blown investigation, and I'm not even talking about by Major League Baseball, but by the government and the FBI and so on, doing this full blown investigation and understanding who was responsible for these transactions. Because Shohei, right now, at least from based on what I've seen from day one to day three, is claiming essentially that he didn't consent to these transactions. It was essentially stolen from him. So, and listen, $4.5 million. Let's be realistic for a second. It's not like that just happens overnight. So, this very clearly has been going on for a while. Now, my other big problem, Eddie, is coming from a sense of a compulsive gambler mindset for a second. If you're going to build and keep on betting and you keep on losing, right? To me, what's going to make this very interesting and where this could be a problem for Shohei in particular is that if the bet, even if it wasn't placed by him, if the bet is placed in baseball, because the way the rules are simple, right? The NFL, what happens? You can't bet on football. You can bet now. The rules and regulations are a little bit different for football, right? You're not allowed to bet in facility and so on. It's a little bit chaotic there. But as an athlete, you can't bet on football, right? As baseball, you can't bet on baseball. And now I actually don't know about the rules about Japan and so on, if he's allowed to bet on Japanese baseball and so on. But I'm not trying to speculate. But to me, you get a feel when you start getting down so much, at some point you have to feel baseball was bet on there. And the reason why I say that that's a problem, rather Shohei or not, is because the bettor develops inside knowledge and may have an advantage that the normal person betting may not have, which is the reason why you're not allowed to bet on your own sports as an athlete. So for me, overall, to say it like this, again, I'm not going to speculate what happened. Really, we need to wait for the full investigation to go through to really have a true answer. But if it is found out that Shohei Ohtani is somewhat found in this, he's going to be suspended. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Right now, the translator essentially is the fall guy. He very well could be the one at fault. But to me, $4.5 million off Ohtani's personal account, and this is why to me it's a little bit sketchy, you have to know about it somehow. Unless his translator directly had access to his account, which Shohei's claiming he didn't, right? So, to me, Shohei has to be in the knowledge somewhere. $4.5 million to most athletes may not, especially him, may not be a lot of money. But, dude, that's a lot of money to be taking out in one transaction without being notified. So, we'll see what happens, but it's definitely going to be a discussion throughout, I would say, the entire year of Major League Baseball. And unless unless we really find out that Shohei has nothing to do with this, through not again Major League Baseball's investigation, but the government's investigation, then we will truly, I'd say, push aside the discussion about Shohei. But this will likely lead to criminal action, not on Shohei's end, but on the translator's end. So that's the fact of the matter of it. And again, it's going to be interesting to see how things develop. But this could spiral out of control and has the potential to be one of the crazier stories I think that we will see. And to be honest with you, Eddie, I'll end it with this in regards to discussion. It's the worst case scenario I think that anybody thinks about in terms of sports gambling. That, listen, there's athletes that bet all the time, right? But to get to this extent, it's the worst case scenario that you can think of, and that you don't want to see happen in the world of sports betting, because that's where it just creates scenarios where the general betting world has all these question marks, and it creates an even bigger one.
Yeah, and say what you want about all this stuff with sports betting and how intertwined it's become with professional sports and how they promote them themselves, and that's a discussion for another day. But what sets this one apart compared to, I mean, we've seen players suspended in the NFL, Calvin Ridley, notably, a few players on the Colts that were betting either while they were on property at the facility, which was violating team rules, or Calvin Ridley violating NFL rules. This situation isn't about Major League Baseball rules. This situation is about criminal action, like you said. There could be illegalities here because $4.5 million from Shohei Ohtani's account is being used to pay off an illegal bookie, number one, and either Ipe stole it from him, or Ohtani helped his friend out and gave him $4.5 million, or it was Shohei Ohtani's debts in the first place, and Ipe's the one that actually placed the transaction. So there's three different ways this can go, and I don't think any of them are really going to work out in Ohtani's favor here. And it really depends on how involved he actually was in this situation that will lead to where this goes from here. Again, until he's suspended, he's going to be on the field. I don't think it's going to affect his play at all. Obviously, it's going to be an overarching distraction, like you've said, not just for the Dodgers, but it's going to become the number one story in Major League Baseball. The year after the whole Astros scandal came out, it was all everybody talked about that season. So this is going to certainly be that, especially with Shohei Ohtani having already been in the news all off season and really going back to the second half of last year. People wondering, where's he going to go? Who's he going to sign with? Is he going to get traded by the Angels? No, he's not. So he's going to be a free agent. Where's he going to go? Then he goes to the Dodgers. He gets this crazy contract. Then the whole thing with all the deferred money. There's been so many scandals with Shohei Ohtani over the last year or so, but this is the first one that actually potentially could be of his doing. So it's going to be really interesting where this goes. Go ahead.
I was also going to say, too, for those that may not fully be following the story, I do want to emphasize one thing, because when the story first came out, there was severe misinformation. On Shohei Ohtani's contract, there is nothing that says that if his translator is fired, he can opt out of his contract immediately. Yeah. Only if ownership is fired, because I keep on seeing people talking about that online. It only specifies ownership. And in all fairness, I don't really see anybody from the Dodgers being fired from the situation, because unless they were, in knowing about it right throughout the signing process, which is very unlikely in my opinion, to me overall, I mean, now correction, I should say it like this, how they've handled it, in my opinion, has been poorly, the Dodgers, in terms of putting somebody out there and going through this whole situation and then changing the answers and everything in a matter of 24 hours, right? But in terms of the signing process, if they were not in the know about this to begin with, to me, there should be nobody held accountable other than what we saw in the press conference, a couple days back.
Yeah, well, we'll see where that goes from here, but the Dodgers, of course, are favorites going into this season yet again. The real question is, will they actually show up in the postseason? Back-to-back years where they've looked like maybe the best team in the regular season and then have a disappointing ending. And back-to-back years, too, where this expanded wildcard playoff format has produced some surprising teams going on deep runs, of course, with the Arizona Diamondbacks reaching the World Series last year out of nowhere to face off with Texas Rangers, who ultimately came out with that top prize. Dodgers and Padres played those two games in Seoul. I don't think there's too much to read into with those. Dodgers are going to be a good team. I think Yamamoto is going to figure it out eventually. San Diego's starting lineup is 7 shortstops plus Tyler Wade. I don't really like this Padres team, to be completely honest, going into this year with how good the NL West is. I think they're going to be a playoff contender for sure, but I don't really know about this team's viability, especially losing Blake Snell. The NL West is loaded this season. Arizona still retained most of the pieces they had last year because that was a young team, and most of that team was still under control. And then the Giants, arguably, I think holistically, in terms of meeting their needs with several moves, may have had the best free agency of any team in Major League Baseball now that they've added Blake Snell. You add Jordan Hicks, you bring Jorge Soler into the mix, you add Mac Chapman. That is a really, really stacked team all of a sudden. Plus, they were already growing with some young talent. I know they hit some bumps the last couple of years, but the Giants, I think, are a really compelling story as well. So the NL West is going to be a challenge. Before we get to some other teams, let's finish off here on the West, Tim. Besides the Dodgers, and I know a lot of this hinges on what happens here with Shohei Ohtani, we know that team's going to be good. Real question is, can they compete in the playoffs? And if not, which NL West team do you think has the potential to go the deepest this year?
I mean, it's the team you just mentioned. It's got to be the San Francisco Giants, which, again, finally, give them credit. They finally got their guy. Yeah, it's not Aaron Judge. Yeah, it's not this, jumbo contract signing. But to me, it made no sense that a pitcher the caliber of Blake Snell, uh, 2 years, what is it, 65, 60, however, I know 60 plus million, whatever the number is.
Two for
So
62.
62. Thank you. So $31 million a year, right? To me, I don't understand that from a Yankees fan, but it's like the guy has the resume, right? And it goes back to my point of like, not to talk about the Yankees, right? Of why I never understood Carlos Rodon signing. He's hit, miss, up, down in terms of his career ERAs and so on. Blake Snell, when healthy, is one of the best pitchers in baseball. And how often do you find a pitcher that wins an AL and an NL Cy Young, right? So to me, overall, the resume there's relevancy and recent success that for the process to last as long as it did and for teams to not one pay him a lot, unless there was something you saw in an injury report, to me makes absolutely zero sense. And San Francisco, let's not forget what they did a few years ago, right? With that very, very strong pitching staff that they had. They kind of lost it that offseason. Listen, if they start building things up and they really put a full season together, I would not be surprised if they're the team we're talking about in the NL West and a team, to be honest with you, that we could be talking about in the World Series. But again, it's going to be hard to beat that Dodgers team, but it's about big moments when it matters. And Blake Snell, in my opinion, by the way, is one of those big moment pitchers that could step up in a clutch and win a team World Series.
Let's go to the NL East. Let me talk about these Mets for a second. This team is not going to be good this year. I have a lot of problems with the roster. I do like adding JD Martinez. I think that was a necessity to add a little more length to the lineup, but it's becoming now historically, for some reason, the Mets are taking the garage sale pieces from the New York Yankees, and the only one of those that has worked in the last 10 years is Curtis Granderson. I mean, I don't really necessarily like the Harrison Bader move as an everyday player. I really don't like the Luis Severino move because I saw how much he struggled last year, not just in the major leagues, but even in his minor league rehab starts. I worked in Somerset with the Patriots this last summer, and I saw him struggle against AA hitters. I don't think Luis Severino has much left in the tank. And the Mets rotation is bad. One of the worst, I'd say, in the National League. And I don't think that's an overstatement. With Kodai Senga out for who knows how long, if Senga comes back pretty efficiently, the rotation looks better because Senga is a really good pitcher, but I don't really like this rotation besides Sean Manaea. Jose Quintana looked good in the second half of last season, but he's old. Tyler McGill has been very flawed and has been an up and down pitcher throughout his career with the Mets. I've already said what I had to say about Severino. I think Sean Manaea is the only potential bright spot in this rotation right now. And Adrian Hauser, I mean, he's a fourth starter. I don't really think there's much there. It's to think that this is a team that in the last 2 years has had Max Scherzer, Justin Verlander, Jacob deGrom on that roster, in that rotation. Even other good guys like Chris Bassett and Marcus Stroman a few years back. And this is what it's fallen to. At least there are some in the pipeline that might be able to fix this up. Mike Vassell, Christian Scott, Dom Hamill. All three of those names could end up in the rotation by the end of the season. But the Mets have a lot of problems. The lineup itself is not much improved from last year. So we'll see how Francisco Alvarez develops. The real question for me is what happens with Pete Alonso, because clearly the Mets, for some reason, Steve Cohen's too busy focused on trying to get the casino, I think, and set up that whole deal to actually spend money on the team at this point, even though he's loaded. And they're not willing to sign Pete Alonso. And I think a very indicative moment was an interview that was done with Francisco Lindor couple days ago after they signed JD Martinez, how Steve Cohen texted him and Nimmo to let them know that JD Martinez was coming in. Not arguably the best offensive player on the team in Pete Alonso, which makes me think he's probably going to go into free agency, or the Mets are below 500. I would not be shocked if Pete Alonso gets traded in July. So I think that's where the Mets stand right now. The NL East is really good. The Phillies, Rob Thompson just finds ways to win with that group. in the postseason, and that is a really talented lineup with Harper, with Turner, with Schwarber, with everybody in the mix there. So it's going to be really difficult to stop them. The Braves are the Braves. And the Marlins, I think, are on the up and up. And I think this is a year Miami might potentially get back to the playoffs with the roster that they've built. They have Sixto Sanchez back for the first time since 2020. That rotation is getting better. They made a couple of nice moves in free agency as well. Mets, I think, are a fourth place team this year, and I really don't think there's much of a ceiling for this group. Maybe they can get to 500, but I think that would honestly be a victory if they could finish 500 on the year.
Yeah, I mean, the way I view it for the Mets is the pitching staff is still an absolute mess. What really devastates me is that I don't understand the plan, right? To have everything, with Vientos and so on, and have this whole conversation about DH just to overturn it last second and go get JD Martinez, which might I add too, and I want to gloat about JD Martinez for a second because I think that's a lot bigger of a signing than a lot of people realize. I actually said when the Yankees, if they were going to depart with Giancarlo Stanton, I felt the appropriate DH that the Yankees could replace him with is JD Martinez. And the reason why I say that is because, yes, while he can't really play the field, you are getting a regularly 3,100 guy, at worst 25 and 80 when healthy. And to me, what makes him stand out is that it's not like he's just a power hitter that can't produce average. JD Martinez is regularly above a 270, near 300 average. I go all the way back to his times even in Boston, right, where he was a part of that World Series group. JD Martinez, I would even argue, Eddie, is the best DH baseball has seen outside of Nelson Cruz since Big Papi. And really, to be honest with you, when you compare his all-time stats in terms of hitting, outside of average, which Edgar Martinez, of course, had I think it was a career 320 or whatever it was. Very comparable numbers to an Edgar Martinez. So to me, JD Martinez is a big, big boost and add-on for a Mets team that, let's be honest, has had a very underwhelming DH, really, for a while now. So that's a big add-on. And I truthfully think, going back to the point about the pitching staff, right? The pitching staff's a mess, but I feel this offense, if it goes on all cylinders as it was in past seasons, can be a top 5, top 7 offense in all of Major League Baseball. But you need an ace. And with Senga being hurt, the Mets don't really have an answer, which, to be honest with you, I feel the reason why the Mets at best this season, Eddie, are that last team in virtue of a wild card, but I only see them at best being 2-3 games above 500. Realistically, I would say a 76 win team. I just don't see much about the Mets this year, unfortunately. But yeah, you mentioned the Marlins. I think they're going to be interesting, but I still think the NL East runs through the Braves. The Phillies are going to be a definite wild card team. It's just that Braves team gets better and better and better, and then outside of the World Series, when of course kind of comes short in the postseason. So we'll see what happens. But I would still argue the NL East is not going to be the weakest division or the strongest division. I just think it's going to be real stout this year, and that you're going to have some good average baseball teams that'll be in the mix.
Yeah. Now let's go to a division. And I agree with you. I think it runs for the Braves. Phillies obviously have proven the last 2 years that they can go on deep postseason runs. And Atlanta, I think, is very capable of that as well with that lineup and that rotation. The Central. I think the Central is going to be pretty bad this year. The Cardinals didn't really do much to improve that roster. Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado, both 1 year older. The Brewers lose Corbin Burns to Baltimore. They lose a lot of that rotation. You got Woodruff gets the Tommy John. So this team really doesn't have much of a rotation anymore, which was their backbone the last couple of years. Pittsburgh, I still think, is going to be a mess, even as more prospects make their way up to the majors. And I think Paul Skeens is going to have a great Major League Baseball career, but that team's still a couple of years away. The Cubs did make a couple of positive moves as well. They bring back Cody Bellinger, but I really think this year I'm confident that the Central is going to run through the Reds. I don't think any of these teams are all that good. I think the Central's only getting one team in the playoffs. I think it's going to come down to the Reds, the Cubs, and the Cardinals, but I like Cincinnati the best. I like their roster. Maybe Frankie Montas in a new home can actually stay healthy for once. But that offense, all those young pieces coming in, Even with no more Joey Votto, it creates more of a spot for Steer, McLean, and Encarnacion Strand, Ellie De La Cruz, Jonathan India. This team is stacked. Will Benson had a good year last year. Friedel, they have so much young talent. And after seeing what Arizona was able to do with plenty of young talent to make it to the World Series last year, and frankly, Texas as well, if you consider that lineup, I think Cincinnati is very capable of doing something similar and getting into the playoffs as the NL Central champion, and then maybe making a little bit of a run. So I like this Reds team. I think they're the best all-around team in the NL Central, though I think the Cubs are still a pretty close second.
Yeah, I feel the Cubs definitely are going to be in the mix, but I agree with you. I only see one team coming out of this NL Central, and I also see it being the Cincinnati Reds. I know Pittsburgh had that big jump. What is that, last year already, or was that 2 years ago at this point? I remember the big start for Pittsburgh. Feels like
Last
forever.
year.
But
Yeah.
last year, so it's like I remember the hot start for Pittsburgh. It didn't work out as well. Milwaukee, it's going to be very interesting to see what the Brewers do, because every year where I feel like Milwaukee regresses, they just surprise us. And then they end up winning the Central. They do something, whatever. So it's like, I don't exactly want to count out Milwaukee, but I don't see them really being competitive at all. And I mean, the Cardinals, I just don't understand how the Cardinals made all these moves and just continue to get worse and worse and worse. It's just not what we're used to seeing out of St. Louis. But, when you look at how competitive this NL is, and it's the reason why I go back to, like, how we talked about the Mets, Eddie, just a moment ago, where it's like at best, I could see them being the last wild card team in. The East and the West are stacked with really good baseball teams. The Diamondbacks, who we just talked about being in the World Series last year, there's a realistic possibility that they may not even make the playoffs this year with how stacked the NL is on the East and the West side. So realistically, if you're going to win the Central, you're going to have to win the division. And to be honest with you, I kind of see it playing the role as what the AL Central did last year, where you're just going to have that one mediocre team that may end up making a decent playoff run. You never know, but it'll be a mediocre team that wins that division. And really, what I hope for the Reds is that this year, if they are winning the division, Eddie, they make a move at the deadline. Last year was unacceptable. And to me, Cincinnati needs to do a better job if they're going to want to win a World Series. And yes, there's going to be time for them to develop, but the youth they have does not come very often in terms of success, and you need to capitalize on it when you can get it.
Let's go to the American League. I'm going to save the Yankees for last. Let's go to the Central first, which again I think is a pretty bad division. I think it's the worst of the six, which has been the case each of the last few years, which is ironic because, they have had three different teams make the World Series from that division in the last 12 years, but none since way back in 2016. I still think Cleveland is a potential because of their rotation if they can stay healthy. I like Tristan McKenzie, obviously Shane Bieber, but Kansas City is still really bad in my opinion. Those prospects haven't really panned out for them as well as they would have hoped. Detroit the same way. The White Sox are a complete mess, and now they trade away Dylan Cease, so there is nothing there. Their opening day starter is someone who didn't pitch further than 4 innings in any game last season. So that tells you the state of the Chicago White Sox right now. I think it's going to come down between Cleveland and Minnesota, who have consistently been the two best clubs of the five in that division over the last half decade. I like Minnesota's depth. I like Cleveland's lineup and their youth and their starting rotation. I'll give the slight nod up to Cleveland for now to win the Central, but I could really see this division going either way. But I think, without a doubt, the AL Central again leaps and bounds the weakest division of the six in Major League Baseball.
Agreed 100% that it's going to be the weakest division. I feel the Twins are going to end up getting the edge in that division, just over the Guardians. But I do want to say this too. I think it's gone very underrated this offseason what the Kansas City Royals have done. I feel that they are starting to make progress and start really starting to build a direction again towards being a relevant baseball team. So I don't think they're going to be the worst team in baseball. The Chicago White Sox, to be honest with you, if I'm going to make an early prediction, may just be baseball's worst team this year. So with that being said, I think that the Central is going to, again, probably have a high 80 game winner end up winning its division. But I'm going to go with the Twins just because I think that from a consistency standpoint and experience standpoint, the Twins have really produced when it matters, especially late in the season. You just need key contributors being healthy when it matters. And really, to be honest with you, with the Guardians, I think that's what made a big difference last season and past seasons for them of being in a playoff push or not. So I think that the deadline will make a big difference for either of these two teams and what we'll see around the waiver wire, which again, really last season, right, Eddie, when we think about it, that was the first. We don't really see that too often where waivers, additions after the deadline kind of make a difference. So we'll see what happens. But I think that it's by far the worst division in baseball, unfortunately, yet again.
So let's go to the AL West, which is just a lot to dive into from this division. So you've got the Oakland A's, who are a mess. There's no direction with the franchise with whether they're even going to be playing baseball in a couple of years. They're going to be atrocious. The Angels are now in the post Shohei Ohtani era. They still have Mike Trout. They have some prospects coming up. But again, that team does not have pitching. And now that they've lost Ohtani, they really don't have pitching. So they're going to be bad. The Mariners made some weird trades this offseason that didn't make much sense. You have the whole deal with Jarred Kelenic going to the Braves, and they get two pitchers back, and yet both of them somehow need Tommy John surgery. So Seattle, I think, while they'll be competitive and maybe a fringe wild card contender, the battle's in the Lone Star State. It's Texas, it's Houston, just like it was in the ALCS last year. The Astros are just as good as they'd be any other year. That rotation is still incredible. Justin Verlander, once he's back healthy, is still going to be a good pitcher. They have Framber Valdez, who would be an ace if it wasn't for Justin Verlander being on the same team as him. Their bullpen just got better with Josh Hader, and that lineup can still absolutely rake. And then you got Texas that loses a couple of pieces. Of course, Scherzer's going to be out to start the year. You don't have DeGrom, but frankly, you won a World Series without both of them, so not much to worry about there. And that lineup is elite. Adolis Garcia emerged into a bona fide superstar in the postseason, and you got a young team with Josh Jung and Heim, and then you still got Seager and Simeon. It's going to be between the Rangers and the Astros. I think Houston's going to be hungry this year to get back on top in the big state of Texas. I think the Astros win the West, but I think both of these teams are going to be true contenders and maybe the two favorites going into October.
Yeah, I agree. They're definitely going to be two of the big favorites. I'm just thanking the Lord that Blake Snell did not go to the Houston Astros because I was going to lose my mind if that was the case. But overall, I mean, I feel that defeat was a good thing for Houston because it gives them a sense of hunger and the fact that roster is still stacked from top to bottom. And the same thing with the Rangers. And to be honest with you, the Rangers kind of lost a little bit, during this offseason, but they can always build. And I don't know what to say about the Oakland A's. I still think the White Sox are going to be the worst team in baseball this year, but at some point, something's going to have to change about the A's. They need to be put in a league of their own, literally, with just how poorly they're managed and everything else. It's getting very bad to the point that not even your own fans want to come support you, which tells a lot about the organization. So I'm eager to see what happens, but the AL West is by far a two-horse race. And I mean, again, I'm not trying to give a prediction because I know that's not what this is fully about of who's going to win what division, but I could see it going either way. But man, Houston's going to be a force to reckon with this year. And if Texas has any say in it, then congrats to them. But all I know is that I don't think the deadline last year was as exciting. Houston, or I should say, Texas made it very, very exciting. Did the Rangers? I don't know if they can do it again. This coming trade deadline, but I would expect both of these teams to be the biggest buyers in baseball, and it's not just because of the amount of money they have. It's the sense of urgency, which is what I love to see, and by far, I don't want to say the most exciting division of baseball, just because I think there's other divisions like the NL West that are exciting, but definitely two of the most exciting teams to watch in baseball this year.
Yeah, a budding rivalry, especially with the intensity of that series last year with the reliever getting ejected for hitting Adolis Garcia and the benches clearing. It's going to be a good rivalry all season long. Let's finish with the AL East before we touch on the Yankees, because I know you're going to have a lot to say there, Tim. The other four teams in the division. I think this is finally the year the Tampa Bay Rays take a little bit of a step back with everything that happened with Wander Franco after they gave him all that money. Paired with the fact that they have lost some pieces in free agency, especially from that bullpen. After a while, you can't keep all these good arms because they're going to demand money, and they've learned that the hard way. I think this is the year Tampa might fall out of the playoff mix a little bit. I think Boston is going to be atrocious this year. I really think the Red Sox are going to be bad. And then you've got Baltimore that disappointed, were underwhelming in the postseason. But again, that's a young team that was their first trip there, and they're just going to get better because Jackson Holiday is coming in, and this kid is an incredible talent, like better than any of these other prospects that they've brought up. And they've had some good ones in Gunnar Henderson and Adley Rutschman already. That's a great young team that's going to be in the mix to win the American League. And then you got Toronto, who I think the Blue Jays, while they've underperformed when it's mattered most in September and October, really ever since 2020, I still trust that team to be contending. And that rotation was really good last year. And they did get Danny Berger, so maybe he finds his way back. He did homer off of Garrett Cole in spring training. More on Garrett Cole and the Yankees in a minute, but
Oh, so I got hurt.
yeah, maybe too many burgers. Yeah, the
Yeah.
burger bomb is what injured Garrett Cole. But Tim, Xing the Yankees for a second. We'll get to them. What do you like about the East? Do you think Tampa's going to fade? Do you think Baltimore's got a real chance to contend this year? And where do Toronto and Boston fit into things?
I don't know, just like how I was just talking a moment ago about another team of the Milwaukee Brewers. I think I've learned as a Yankees fan, especially, to never count out the Tampa Bay Rays just because anything can happen. And while I do agree, I do see them progressing a little bit, I am deathly scared of the Baltimore Orioles. Baltimore turned around, took a dominant season in the East last year, and said, hey, you know what? You know all these stories about our team not investing, not wanting to make a big difference, and we're just kind of complacent, and our own organization wasn't even the number one focus in Baltimore. Well, they turn around, they get Corbin Burns, they recruit all these prospects, and they build, 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 build. Outside of course, two teams we just talked about, right? The Rangers and the Astros. I know Baltimore didn't win a playoff series last year, but I truthfully believe the Baltimore Orioles this year are a World Series threat. They have that guy now that can lead them, especially. And I really do think if there's a team that I'm going to say right up front that's going to win a World Series this year, it's probably the Baltimore Orioles. They are going to be fun to watch. They're going to be exciting, and it's a good thing for the city of Baltimore. As for Toronto, I thought they had a very good off season as well. They've just kind of been the mix where it's like that's the thing about the Blue Jays. It's weird, right? It feels like they've just never been able to take control of the East. They've been kind of just that number two team, whatever. But they are good enough to do damage. And again, I talk about the AL West being exciting between the Astros and the Rangers. I would say in the East, it's three teams that are going to make it exciting, including the Yankees, who I feel are going to be in a topic of discussion. And of course, again, I think the Rays are going to be above 500 team. But I would say that you're going to see most of the wild cards come out of the AL East. It's just a matter of who's it going to be. But I really do think the Baltimore Orioles are going to be the team and the face this year of Major League Baseball. There's just so much to talk about, so much question marks in regards to young talent and what they've gotten, out of somebody like Corbin Burns and how aggressive they'll get in the deadline, which again, I keep on emphasizing because it is a big part of the Major League Baseball season of how you add on and build as the season goes on. That it's going to be entertaining, but I feel that when you look at the AL East, anything can happen. And that's what makes baseball so exciting. And it all starts in opening day, for Baltimore setting the tone early. And I think that's what they're going to do is get out to that early lead and control the division because, again, they just have that team.
Yeah, and very clear that they've made philosophical changes in how they handle business. And I think that's really going to work out in their favor this year. Don't want to forget about Baltimore. Definitely, I think they are the favorite in the AL East. The team that is not the favorite in the AL East, though, are the 2024 New York Yankees, who now are going to be without Garrett Cole for at least the first month or two, are going to be relying on Nestor Cortez, Carlos Rodon, and Marcus Stroman to anchor their rotation. Their biggest prospect, Jason Dominguez, played 8 games, and then he needed Tommy John surgery, so he's out all year. And then the lineup adds Juan Soto, but all anybody's talking about is where he's going next year and not the fact that he's here this year. But the Yankees are going to hit home runs. They got Judge, they got Soto, they got Stanton. Simple as that. Will they do enough and will they stay healthy? And already those questions with Aaron Judge's foot. I don't understand how hard he hit his foot on that wall at Dodger Stadium a year ago because he somehow still has a lingering issue there. And then, of course, Garrett Cole being out. Tim, the floor is yours. The 2024 New York Yankees. What's your expectations?
A disaster. Let's just put it like this. The Yankees will be above 500 as they are every season. They will.
Yeah, but that's not a disaster. Above 500, I'll gladly take
yes,
above 500.
I agree. But there's no other team in Major League Baseball that's had a GM for over 20 years that constantly produces above 500, which in terms of complacency. I mean, again, I don't mean to compare sports, but Eddie, did we not just watch an NFL offseason of good head coaches all get fired for not producing results? Yes or no?
Yes, but I didn't really agree with some of those moves.
Well,
Most of those moves.
But the point is that the Yankees are complacent, and this is what irritates me. Brian Cashman was on the hot seat this offseason. Yankee fans irate, GM ownership irate, right? The Yankees turn around, they make a big move to get Juan Soto. At first, I'm like, all right, we'll see what happens. It's the first step in the right direction. But the Yankees haven't done anything really since to better this roster. Again, it blows my mind. It ticks me off, especially after Garrett Cole getting hurt. I understand Cole's not hurt, whatever. You know he's your number one. But the amount of money Blake Snell was paid, you are telling me that you can go piss $100+ million to Carlos Rodon, who is an absolute joke of a pitcher, inconsistent up and down, Frankie Montas 2.0, I've said it on the show multiple times, who is going to produce inconsistent numbers for the Yankees, and you're going to turn around and not give it to a two-time Cy Young winner who has done something relevant of late in Major League Baseball, absolutely blows my mind, which is what ticks me off. Again, I'm not saying the Yankees need to go and get every single player out there, but there needed to be a sense of direction and change. I understand why the Yankees didn't let Giancarlo Stanton go. I get that. Why? Because the image when you traded for him was that he was going to be one of the pieces that was going to win a World Series, both him and Judge. And I get that. I think Stanton has a better year, by the way. Overall, I do feel though he's going to be a big scapegoat on the team in terms of what fans look for and say, man, this is the guy and this is the reason why we struggle, just like how it was Aaron Hicks last year or Joey Gallo the season before. But the pitching staff, listen, Nestor Cortez, I think is a very good pitcher, but he needs to stay healthy. The constant conversation for the Yankees is health. We don't know about Aaron Judge. And, you know, Eddie, a few moments ago, you mentioned his injury, right? Well, guess what? Aaron Judge has been healthy 3 seasons of his 7-year career. He's been hurt 4 times in terms of his 7-year career in regards to missing a big chunk of the season. He hasn't played a full year outside of his dominant historic year 2 seasons ago on a consistent basis. And I'm not saying Aaron Judge isn't worth the money. I still argue he is baseball's most valuable and best player. But that doesn't mean anything if he can't stay on the field. And Anthony Rizzo, I hope he's back. I hope he's back to 100%. DJ LeMahieu, listen, I love everything that he's done for the Yankees. I said I wouldn't complain if he turns around with the contract years ago when they re-signed him and if he did nothing, but he continues as well to be a liability with injuries. Gleyber Torres should be solid at leadoff. Verdugo looks very decent, but he's a platoon hitter, just like how Stanton, in my opinion, has become a platoon hitter against lefties. Verdugo can only hit righties. Listen, the Yankees have some pieces offensively, but just like the Mets, it's the pitching staff's concern. And when you trade, especially some of the team's biggest relievers away, I don't know what to think. I know that the bullpen was the Yankees' strong suit last year, but Cashman, you have to have a sense of urgency if you really say you care and want to turn things around, because not getting Blake Snell is the pure definition of saying, I have no urgency. I think I know better than everybody else. And that's the reason why you haven't won a World Series since 2009, nor have even come close. Because the fact of the matter is, you need to adapt and change with baseball. And I don't know what else slaps you in the face other than the defending Cy Young winner was available, and you didn't go get him for $60 million, which is nothing in terms of luxury tax. And hey, who knows? Even if the Yankees were so worried about that, guess what? You could have dealt some money somewhere. You could have paid him over the next 10 years. But Brian Cashman doesn't believe in that. So that's the reason why we have no prospects or anything. And the Yankees are just going to continue to fall apart. So I'll put it at that. Third place team at best. They're not winning the East. They're going to be a wild card, and they'll probably lose in a wild card round. Probably get swept, to be honest, because they may get 3-4 hits at most. And yeah, Juan Soto won't be a Yankee next year, probably because he's a Scott Boras agent, which, by the way, not to progress further, but you want to talk about the biggest downfall, I'd say, this offseason and who was the biggest loser? It was probably Scott Boras.
Oh, it was.
How did it all work out for his players? It didn't really work out well, now did it?
Yeah, it didn't. All it did was cause a bunch of chaos with a bunch of players just sitting at home. And Jordan Montgomery is still sitting at home. We're a
And,
week
and by
away
the way,
from opening day.
And by the way, just to mention, I want him to be a Yankee, but I absolutely understand why Jordan Montgomery shouldn't come to the Yankees, because I would be pretty ticked off too if on deadline day, with no explanation of why the Yankees were going to trade him away, we trade him for Harrison Bader, which again, Harrison Bader was our only hitter in the postseason. I'm not going to take that away. But you saw Raheel Mai's reaction when that happened, right? It makes no sense. Jordan Montgomery is a consistent mid-3 ERA pitcher, and while the Yankees had no role from the postseason, he's the pure definition of consistency. And to go see him win a World Series, pitch dominant, it blows my mind that A, teams aren't going to get him, but B, again, the reason why I don't understand Brian Cashman's method of thinking, relevancy, consistency. Jordan Montgomery was the pure definition of that, and you let that go. So for me, I would love Jordan Montgomery if he came back to the Yankees and forgave, ownership and everything else for what they did. But I will not blame him if he goes to even a division rival, because again, it shows the mismanagement of New York Yankees, and a big reason why, again, I just can't stand to watch this team continue to go through the same cycle year in and year out, because it's the process of frustration. And again, I'm rooting for the Yankees to be successful. I don't want to be the negative Nancy, but I see urgency in Baltimore. I see urgency in all these other organizations. And I get not every player is Juan Soto, and he's a great player. But when you have a year like last year and you claim that you still believe this team's capable of winning a World Series, you need to do more. And Brian Cashman simply has never bought in to do more, because of the fact that he's out of touch with Major League Baseball in 2024 and should not have a job as the GM of the New York Yankees. Just simply put.
Mic drop from Mr. Moore. That was incredible. But yes, I do agree with your whole main point here too about the Scott Boras influence. Like, it's ridiculous. The Mets signed JD Martinez. He's still sitting there, and he's not going to be ready. He's already told the Mets option him to AAA to start the season because he's not going to be ready to face Major League hitting on opening day. Like, why is free agency lasting this deep into spring training for high caliber players? It makes no sense. It's the Boras influence, which I talked about a couple of weeks ago on this show. But yeah, it's fun. It's crazy how it's fallen. 2 years ago, Mets win 102 games. Aaron Judge hits the home run record. And now the Mets and Yankees are both dysfunctional messes. I don't think this is going to be a good year of New York baseball whatsoever for either side, but we'll see. But again, a good year for the Mets versus a good year for the Yankees seem to mean two completely different things to us. So we'll see how it goes, but we will have our full predictions out for you on the socials and at sports-speak.com before opening day Thursday. We'll get them from Raheel and Zoe as well. Tim always has an interesting pick or two thrown in there. So we'll see our Cy Youngs, MVPs, Rookie of the Year, and of course our World Series picks.
Young this year, I promise.
No Zach Greinke? Nope.
No, I promise he's not winning AL Cy Young.
Well, we shall see. Stay tuned for that. We'll be back next week. But that'll do it for this episode of Sports Speak Live, episode 168, powered by SeatGeek. I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
Enjoy opening day of the Major League Baseball season. We'll talk to you next week.